Hey,
How you doing, man? Thanks for coming on. And I want to thank Debbie and Gerry over at It's Another Sunday Podcast for recommending you. You did a podcast with them recently, and it was I don't know how we're going to
yeah.
top it.
Well, I think we should give it our best effort. I bet we can do it.
Let's do it.
I feel lucky right now.
All right. I feel lucky as well. You've been in the music industry for quite a long time, and recently you released a book, and that tells us all about your life. And I kind of want to focus on the book because I got to read a bunch of the first pages, a chapter or so far.
He might want to focus on the book. I'm talking about everything about you. Where are you calling in from today?
I'm calling from home in New York City. I'm trying to get this camera all arranged. It's doing. There we go. You can see
Perfect.
I haven't been home much lately. Look at this thing. This thing's flipping down. I haven't been home all that much lately because I've been on tour since the book came out. But I am home. Those are my CDs. Somewhat useless bits of digitalized music back there. Little
It's quite
bottom of my
quite a
guitar,
collection.
bottom of my nylon string guitar over there, and nice chair over there, which is good for reading. So there you go. That's what doubles as my studio in my home. I'm in New York,
So,
in Queens, New York, Jackson Heights, where I live.
Queens, New York. Okay. Where have you been
Yeah.
touring? Where have you been on the road?
Well, the book came out in early September, and I kind of immediately hit the road. I did 2 weeks in England, largely because my publishing company, Jawbone Press, and my record label, Fire Records, are both based there. So I started off over there and immediately came to the States and did a 20-city tour of the eastern part of the U.S., kind of from home in New York all the way across to, St. Louis and Chicago and back again. And that was great. And I'm starting the year off with January doing a handful of shows on the West Coast, and then 50 shows in Europe starting in February.
The book we're talking about is named "I Wouldn't Say It If It Wasn't True,"
Mhm.
and it's a memoir about your whole life in the music industry.
Yeah, I mean, it's about partially that. Um, I never like to think of myself as someone who's in the music industry because I feel like I'm just a musician, and I by necessity intersect now and then with that world. It's funny when I meet people, as I do often, when you meet people, make small talk in elevators or waiting rooms for this or that, or who knows what, they'll say, well, are you in the music business? I say, I'm not in the music business, I'm a musician. And there's a difference between the two. Um, but yeah, the book is about a lot of things. It is my life story from birth in Santa Monica, California in 1960, up to falling in love with music at the ages of 4 or 5 and just being completely immersed and obsessed with what I was hearing on the radio and seeing in record stores, to learning to play guitar and dreaming of being in a band, to actually being in a band called the Dream Syndicate and having a wild 7-year run where we scaled some heights and hit some lows and came out the other side with with ourselves intact and ready for more. It's kind of a little up and down fable story. It's a musical dream that ends in the musical winning of the lottery, as you might say, and then it's kind of an attempt to blow all the money won in the lottery, and this is of course this is all metaphorical, but blow that metaphorical money in the lottery and somehow come out on the other side able to play another game, and keep going.
That's pretty cool.
It's a great story. Very easy reading.
And I thank you for saying that. That was the intention.
Yeah.
I think from the I as I mentioned in the book, I was not just a musician from age 9 and a songwriter from age 9, but also I was a sports writer, a journalist. I'm in my teens, and that's kind of what I thought I would be doing. So I'm sort of trained from the early age in the who, what, when, where, why style of writing, and having a story that zips along and gets its point across. And I wanted the book to be like that. So what you just said is the best thing I could hear. I'd like it to be a book that people can pick up, read, enjoy, get something from it, and and not be bogged down by page 13 saying, I can't finish this thing. It's just giving me a headache. That was not the intention.
Yeah, and something interesting that I picked up on the on Gerry and Debbie's podcast is this all came from your head. You didn't have like a diary that you wrote down and you pulled it all. So it's pretty
Yeah.
amazing that you can go all the way back from almost day one and put on paper exactly what has happened.
That's right. It's pretty wild. As you say, I did not use notes. I didn't, now and then maybe I would look up to see if I could track down a set list from a show in 1983 to verify the kind of show we might be playing, or maybe, a few little things like that. But for the most part, it's all memory. And when I finished writing the book, I wrote the book mostly from 2020 to 2022, like a 2 or 3 year period there. And when I got the book to its nearly finished state, I sent it around to people who were in the book, people who were there, bandmates like Dennis Duck of the Dream Syndicate, who's been my bandmate for 42 years, or Mark Walden, who's been a bandmate almost along, bass player of the Dream Syndicate. My mother, I sent it to. I sent to Peter Buck from REM, who goes back to the old days with me. Vicky Peters from the Bangles, all these people who were there. And I said, first of all, I'd love to see what you think of the book, but also tell me if I got something wrong. And nobody found anything that I'd missed. In fact, they all kind of had the same reaction you did, saying, "Wow, you remember all this stuff." I said, "Yeah, kind of. I do. I remember these things." Now, if I, if I met somebody, at a show 2 weeks ago and saw him tomorrow, and they'd say, "Hey, remember we talked about, about John Fahey till 2 in the morning?" I'll say, "Refresh my memory." So it's not across the board, but the things that I experienced as a musician in my life did come back pretty easily, and didn't have a problem remembering those things. Now, I just got busted by Mark Walden, the bass player of the Dream Syndicate, for getting a little fact wrong about his background before we started playing together, and I felt terrible about that. So my first little misstep. I'm greatly apologetic to my old buddy Mark Walden.
Your intentions were good, right?
And nothing but good intentions.
So I get a question for you. After the book was printed, did you get it and go, "Oh shit, I forgot to talk about this"? Was there anything significant that you kind of left out of the book?
Not really. I had enough time to I worked on it for a long time. And, as I was writing it, I would realize what you just said, like, oh, I just glossed over this really important thing that happened in 1982, and I would go back and fix it. But, because, records, I've made about 40 records now, and records, you make them kind of usually a pretty fast burst, except for one record I made, which took me 5 months, which is a big part of this book, making Medicine Show. But generally, records, you go in, you spend 3 days or 3 weeks, and you're in and out. And then you hear the record 10 years later and say, "God, I wish the snare wasn't that loud," or "I wish that, I would have made that song the lead-off track instead of the sixth track," and little things like that, because you work so fast and you're making snap judgments on things that. But with the book, I had a lot of time. I spent a long time writing it. So if something seemed right in 2020, and then in the spring of 2022, I said, "Oh, how could I not mention that person?" I had time to put it back in. So no, I got to say with the book, no real big regrets. The hardest thing was knowing when to stop.
Right.
I have a story I really like, and I tell this story often, and it might be apocryphal because for all I know, this didn't happen, but I love the story. That's apparently, according to legend, John Coltrane and Miles Davis were hanging out back when they were both in their quintet together, late 50s, and they're hanging out. And John Coltrane is saying to Miles Davis, "Man, sometimes when I'm soloing, I just can't stop because I'm so excited and more ideas are coming and I'm just in outer space and I'll be soloing for a half hour and I just don't even know how to stop. I just kind of keep going because I don't know how to stop." And Miles Davis, I'm not going to imitate Miles's voice, which is so, easy to imitate or tempting to imitate. But Miles Davis looks at John Coltrane and he says, "Well, try taking the horn out of your mouth." And I use that a lot because I think it's hard to know when to take the horn out of your mouth. It's hard to know sometimes when to stop. It's easy to get going, but when do you take the horn out of your mouth? And with the book, I was having a similar thing. I just kept writing and thinking, well, I've written 250 pages and I'm only up to 1988. What am I going to do? And fortunately, my publisher, Jawbone Press in the UK, helped me take the horn out of my mouth by saying, "You ought to stop there. Stop when the Dream Syndicate breaks up in 1988. That'd be a great time to stop." And they added, "Because then you'll have something for your next book." I said, "Oh, next book. I like the sound of that." So this was the biggest challenge, is knowing when I wrote this book, am I going to write about everything that ever happened to me in my entire life? Because if so, it's going to be a freaking long book. And so I'm glad I stopped when I did.
Do you ever look back and say, "Wow, this is the longest song I've ever written"?
The longest song about the book, you mean?
Yeah.
In a way. And I've written some long songs, let me tell you. So that's saying a lot. But yes, exactly. Yeah, and you put it very well. It is like a song in some ways, where I even the book was like a song where, I began with a cool intro, and then kind of went into the first verse and had to have hooks and choruses along the ways and bring you back to a recurring theme. So it's not that unlike, not unlike that.
You mentioned something that piqued my interest, and it's when you said that you look back and think you wish you put song number 6 before song number 5, or mixed up the layout. You really do go through the whole choreography of setting up an album and planning out how it flows. Tell me about that process.
Well, I'll tell you something. I think about sequencing as much as I think about anything. I think about that as much as I think about the songs, what I'm going to play or sing, who I'm going to play with. I get so into that whole. I really feel like when I make a record, and I still believe in the LP format. It's still, no matter what happens with streaming and all that, I still love the idea of side 1, side 2, and the last song on side 1, and all that feeling. And to me, a record is like a little movie. It's like a little screenplay, and you're, bringing somebody into a story. And by the time you get to the last song, you've experienced something. You've experienced some type of removing of yourself from your present life to go elsewhere in someone else's life. And we're going to bring you back safely to, step 1 by the end. So with all that in mind, to me, sequencing makes or breaks a record, and I do think about that a lot. I think a lot about spacing between songs. That's anybody who's worked with me knows that. With mastering engineers I've worked with, they know I obsess about a millimeter of a second extra or less, because I think that increases the flow of or adds to the flow of what you're hearing. So yeah, I think all that kind of stuff. And when I'm writing the songs, I will often think that's going to be the lead off track. That's going to be the one towards the middle. That's going to be a spot I really love in a record. That's going to be the next to last song. The same way, we all love binging shows now. We all love these series that that have 10 episodes and you watch them all at once or whatever. The whole thing started with, I don't know, Sopranos and The Wire, and that's how that sort of movies now become 10-episode things, and they always talk about how the penultimate episode of a season is the most important, because that's when you bring everything to a head, only to be resolved somehow or not resolved in the final act. I love that way of with records as well. So to me, the next to last record is kind of a way of, get ready, because we're about to wrap things up. This is gonna be, hold on to your hat, or settle back into that easy chair because you've been through a lot, and we're gonna take you home safely. Yeah, think about stuff like that. I don't just write a bunch of songs, knock them out, and let the details be worked out later. And I'm involved in the whole thing.
Interesting, very interesting.
So we're kind of in the same age group. You're only a couple years older than us, so we grew up with a lot of the same music: the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, the Who, all those type of bands. Who was your biggest influence as a child?
Yeah, biggest influence musically as a style to what I did.
Yes.
Well, as you both know, I can tell you're both big music fans, so you know how hard it is to narrow it down to one this or one that. There were different ones along the way. Growing up, of course, the Beatles were, big because they were just the Beatles. I grew up from age 4 to the Beatles were a band for me from age 2 to 9, so that was my youth in real time. Getting Sergeant Pepper when it came out, grieving when they broke up. So of course, it'd be hard not to be swept up in that. But they weren't as big an impact as, say, a band like Creedence Clearwater Revival, which I discovered at age 9, and that opened the gates to so many kinds of music that, I didn't know as much about, Bo Diddley or Marvin Gaye or Hank Williams or all these other kinds. They were like a schooling. And punk rock blew open the doors. Punk rock is the reason I'm doing what I did, because that came at the right time in my life, where I thought, not only is this exciting and, thrilling and in the moment and immediate, but also I'm 17 and this is a soundtrack for independence. And this is also showing me I can do this. I can play this I love it and I can play it. So I think I could be in a band. That was important. But if I had to narrow it down to one, it's hard to say. The Velvet Underground obviously were a big influence, but most of all, probably would be Roxy Music, which I discovered at the age of 14, and that kind of gave me the idea that music could be weird. Music didn't just have to be rockin' or pretty or whatever, but weird worked too. And I think that kind of set me up in a lifetime of making weird music that was also palatable. That was a radical discovery. If you're into the Beatles, you're thinking music's supposed to be inviting and accessible and beloved by everybody. But no, music that people could hate and other people could love, the idea of that division was a big deal to me. And once I kind of was on that track, went, no, no, now I've got an idea of what I want to do or what I want to listen to.
Now, as you were going through, your iterations of the bands you played with, what was the band you first started out with?
Well, I first played in bands, my God, at age 9. I
No
weirdly enough,
kidding.
there's a little 10-second movie someone unearthed of me playing at a birthday party as a 9-year-old. And my wife Linda, she pointed out that I kind of make the same moves and facial expressions at 9 that I do now. So I guess that was my way. We were called the Light Bulbs, and I think it was me on guitar. There was a drummer, and then 4 singers, because who played stuff back then? We were just kind of a funny band. We could do it. I think we played a Beatles song or two. I'm not sure. But
I think you should get the band back together and re-record it and release
well,
it.
you know what, one of those 4 singers ended up marrying, and I believe is still married to the drummer for X, Don Bonebrick, and we're doing a cruise with X. My band, the Baseball Project, and my own solo band, Steve and the Miracle 3, are going to be on a Sirius XM Underground Garage cruise with X next May. So that might be a chance to get the band back together again. I think I should talk to her
How
about
fun
it.
is that?
Yeah, I know. Well, you know what? It's and I'm first to say bands reunite, and it's always kind of interesting. I find that to be I think once was seen as a pathetic thing or a cash in kind of thing. But I find reuniting with old friends is whether on stage, whether in a band or just in your personal life, is very instructive. So why not put that band together again? But I mean, I started playing in bands a lot from a young age. I was very
You just said something that brought me back to a question I want to ask when we were talking about the
yeah.
book. So these stories and these conversations, this conversation is going to go back and forth between the book and your music life so much.
Sure.
I was thinking, when you were writing the book and you got further in, were there times where you said, geez, that's a great story, or I hadn't thought about that person in so long, and pick up the phone and call them or get together with them at any point?
Oh, that's a great question. Maybe in a few cases here and there. Yeah. There were probably I think I'm thinking now, like I said before, the people I got in touch were mostly people that are still in my life.
Yeah.
All
That's great.
yeah, I will sidestep that question by saying when the pandemic hit, I found it very interesting that the people I chose to stay in touch with at a time we couldn't see people, the people I chose to do my Zoom calls with and my FaceTime things with and stay on there, be in touch with, were all bandmates, aside from family. They were all the members of the Dream Syndicate, the members of the Baseball Project. Those are the people that I missed and spent that. So people friends I've made through playing in bands and being in music since I was 21, 22 years old probably mean the most to me in my life. So that's the way of answering your question, to say there aren't that many people in that world I lost touch with. Now, childhood friends, there were a couple that I reached out to, but most of the people in the book are people who meant a lot to me at 20 and still mean a lot to me now.
That's an incredible thing to be able to say. I love that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, music, these are friends I've made. They're being in a band with somebody is a strange thing. Like if you're in a band that's touring a lot, an active band, you're in a situation with somebody where you're with them maybe never more than 6 feet apart for months and months on end. You're together in vans or buses or backstages or on stage or all these things. You're glued at the hip. You're not like that in most jobs. Not, even a marriage, you might when you each go to work during the day or you out to see friends. In a band, you're together non freaking stop. And it's
Sometimes that's how I feel about John and I. A lot of times
I can
it
see
feels
you
that
guys
way.
right now. This
Thanks,
is
buddy.
I see you guys on stage right now with it looks like a really nice venue. But
Great venue.
you could have just easily your backdrop could be 2 guys sitting in a van right now because it was just you look like when I turn around the van I see like a couple my other band members behind me in the row behind me. It's you guys, and that is how you spend most of your days in a van, like you guys are right now, in a moving vehicle, in a backstage,
That's funny.
in a hotel lobby. That's what you do at a bar. This is how close you are day in, day out with your bandmates.
Well, it's interesting because, people that love music or fans or whatever think it's all glamorous. And it's really not. It's a tough job. You late nights, early mornings, close quarters. You're going from hotel to van to hotel to gig to whatever. And it takes a lot on your family life. How did you handle that?
Well, it is hard. I love it. I wouldn't trade it for anything, I keep doing it because I love it. It's a great life. But I'll say, yeah, it's hard. And I've always said I wish in some way everybody who sees a show, loves music, is involved in, yes, the music business, whatever it is, could go on tour for 1 week in their life because they realize, and I don't say this in a oh my poor me kind of way, but it's harder than people think. You don't get a lot of sleep. You don't, if you're into having the continuity of the same bed every night, forget that. You have no control generally over what you eat. You're gonna, you might be healthy, you might be unhealthy. You're gonna eat when you can, how you can. You're gonna be, if you get sick, tough luck, you still got to go to work. All these kind of things. Man, I hate to even say stuff like this because I never whine about it because it's a wonderful life. But I think that it is, you got to want to do it. I guess what I'm trying to say. And I'm in a band now. My main bands I'm in are the Dream Syndicate and the Baseball Project. And I'm also have a solo band that's a little less active. But those two bands, most people in those two bands are my age, I'm 64, or older. A few of them are over 70. The youngest bandmate I have at this point is my wife, Linda. She's, I guess I can say she's 58. So we're all, older and we all still live that life where you're driving all day, pull up the gig, on a good tour where you're making some dough, someone will help you load your gear. On a bad one, you're loading it yourself and you're, setting up, sound checking, rocking out, talking to fans, and it's you might get a few hours of sleep, whatever. That's it's great, but it's also unusual. It's a life you have to want to live.
Steve, when you're intersecting and then you go apart, you're a part of this band, you're a part of that band, and then you have your solo project. When you go off to run your solo project, are you still consulting? Do you ever go to the guys in your other bands and say, hey, I'm having trouble with this, or I'm working on this, what do you think? And collaborate still with the other bands?
Well, there's a lot of overlap
Yeah, okay.
between the projects. That's kind of funny, actually. Like Linda, and of course my solo things. I have worked with everybody in my other bands. Like my new solo album, Make It Right, has Linda and Mike Mills from the Baseball Project, and the entire Dream Syndicate are all on that record as well.
Oh,
So
wow.
there
Okay.
is, there's a lot of overlap anyway in the lives. But yeah, it is. I wouldn't say as much like we all talk about our other projects when we're hanging out, good stuff, bad stuff, frustrating stuff, good tales, bad tales, all things. So yeah, it's natural, like you with any friends. So there's a bit of that, but not so much like, God, this guy's giving me grief. What am I going to do? More just like, well, how's that going? Like right now, I'll take the Baseball Project as a good example. That's the band I have with Mike Mills and Peter Buck from REM and Scott McCoy from -5, my wife Linda. We are all in so many bands. So we have a little group chat thing. We, like any good group of friends, and we're always yakking about this and that. And half the time, Mike's in Europe playing with the big star band, and right now Peter's in Brazil playing with a project down there, and Linda's been making 3 different records recently, and Scott's always making 100 records at the same time. So we tend to write to each other and say, where are you? What are you doing right now? Then you hear about it and say, oh man, send me a song. I want to hear what you're up to. We all, when I think one thing, and this comes up in the book, when I was young, when I was, starting out, it was easy to look at the people around your music and you loved them, but also you were insecure and even jealous sometimes. If somebody has something going on, or they're doing a little better than you, or got the acclaim you weren't getting, whether it was within your band or within your scene, you'd have a little bit of feeling of, oh, how come him and not me? It's a natural thing like you do in life. And now, as we're all older, I'm so excited when any of my friends or bandmates do well or have a cool thing going on. Like, oh
Sure.
man, that's great. What's that like? Are you enjoying it? Is it hard? It's just exciting for all of us. That's a big change in life. But then like you could say the same, I think, for any situation like that,
Yeah.
when you're in your 20s and your buddy got a promotion at work and you say, well, why him and not me? Where you get older and say, oh good, maybe you'll make $1 million and take me out to dinner next week.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Yeah, right. I felt that way when John retired and I couldn't yet.
Oh
Yeah.
man, yeah, exactly. Get those Social Security payments and take me out for a steak.
Yeah, there you go. Oh, gosh.
So let me ask you, you took 10 years off from your last solo project to the one that you're out with now. What is the difference between the two? What are you seeing, or what did you feel going into this one that was different than before?
Well, what I'm doing right now solo is really unlike anything I've done before. When I started last September, and I'm doing it until next May, is a show revolving around the book. And what it is it's an hour and a half long. It contains some reading from the book, a lot of stories that come from the book and expand on stories in the book. And then I'm playing about 14 songs a night that illustrate the points I'm making. Because as an author, most people who go on book tours, all they can do is go on stage and read and take questions, which is great. That's great. That's a great thing. I'm lucky that I'm an author who can go on stage and then say, well, why not? Why am I talking to you about this song when I'll just play it for you? So there's a lot of that. And I've never done this before, but it's a fixed show. It is like a little play. It's a one-man theater piece, whatever you want to call it. It's got, ups, downs, laughs, tears, jokes, music, everything, name dropping, anything you possibly could want. It's all there. And I go out each night, I go on stage, and for the next 80 to 90 minutes, it has this structure. The book is distilled down to this show. And when the show's over, it's, good night, curtain call, throw me flowers, and I'm out the door.
Are you doing a lot of book signings when you're there before you or after you go off stage? Yeah.
After I go off stage, I'm there with the pen and a chair and a table, and come on by. And
A glass of wine, and you're going to be there for a while.
Sounds good. Sign me up.
Now, do you have any shows planned or on this tour? You're going to be in the Boston, Massachusetts area at all?
I was there not long ago. I was actually there recent, but I hope to get back there again. Nothing booked right now, but I always love playing Boston. I am very likely going to be in Boston next September with the baseball project. Long time from now, but that's already in. These days tours are planned so far in advance, so we're already discussing that. So I'm hoping that'll happen. Boston's always great. We played the Sinclair last year and had a ball there. That's
good.
Great venue. Yeah.
Well, we look forward to getting you back here. That's for sure.
Yeah,
a lot of Boston tales in the book, though. A lot of stories about playing the Rat and the In Square Men's Bar and things like that, and all those classic places. Every so often you get to play a place that's still around. There aren't that many. Strangely enough, my hometown of LA seems to have the most continuity of classic venues, like the Whiskey A Go Go and the Troubadour and the Roxy are still going strong. But for the most part, you go around the world and that place is gone, that place is gone. Funny. Too bad. You're right. Boston, the Paradise has been around for a long time.
Yeah.
Lovely. That's a lovely venue. I like that place a lot. But most places, they come and they go.
I love it. Let me ask you, while you're talking about destinations and places to play, what is if you had to look back on all your memories, your favorite spot to have played?
Oh, so many, cities and venues. I mean, being a kid from LA, growing up in LA, when I finally got to play the Troubadour or the Whiskey or the Roxy for the first time, those were all big thrills. They still are. I haven't played the Whiskey in a while, but I play the Roxy and the Troubadour pretty regularly. And you go in there and you think about all the history there. You think about the shows you saw there. I saw, whether it was television or Richard Linda Thompson or Lou Reed at the Roxy when in my teens, and there I am backstage. And let me tell you, you play some of these classic venues like those places, and the backstage are tiny and dingy. Modern venues tend to have it together. They kind of have learned to make things kind of nice and cozy for the artists. But back then they got a little tiny room with, you look at pictures of the Beatles when they're playing Candlestick Park on their first tour, and they're playing mostly sports facilities, of course, but you see them a little mirror and a couple, rickety old chairs, and that's the Beatles playing. It just wasn't, our discomfort wasn't a big thing back then. But that aside, there's me singing the blues again. But playing these classic venues is always great. When I played CBGB's in New York for the first time, when I played the Rat in Boston, which I had, which I knew from the Live at the Rat compilation, these are always great things when you get to play someplace you've heard about or heard a great record from the place and say, yeah, I can kind of visualize it, and there I am now.
You're making me think of, we had a past guest, Jim Sullivan, who wrote a book about all his interviews. He was a Boston Globe music critic, and I'm going to have to ask him if he ever interviewed you over the years. Jim spent a lot of time in all of those venues, and
he sure did with me.
2 volumes. I'm going to have to look at that and see if you're in there.
I'm not, and I'm going to grumble about it because Jim and I have spoken a lot over the years. So I expect to be in volume 3. I'm not pleased
I
about
was just
that, though.
thinking that we got to get
I'll
you in
give
volume 3.
I'll give Jim a pass on that, but we've been friends for a long time.
Oh,
We
that's
had
Oh,
awesome.
that's
all
funny.
kinds of fun nights and wild nights together over the years,
I imagine.
and we still communicate often. So I expect to be in volume 3.
Oh, that's
Now,
great.
if you ask me what the most awe-inspiring venue I've ever performed in Boston, I would have to say Fenway Park.
Wow.
I sang the anthem at Fenway Park in the 4th of July weekend. I believe it was the year 2014, maybe,
Oh,
something like
wow.
that. Yeah, me and Linda and Mike Mills and Scott McCoy, well, we were out there singing before a Yankees Red Sox game, and there's a good picture of that. So I'm
Oh,
that
that's pretty
happened.
cool. Good
Yeah,
for
there's
you.
something
I'll
iconic
take
about
that.
it. There's a lot iconic about Fenway Park, that's for sure.
Oh yeah, yeah, and
And especially a Red Sox Yankee game that takes it to a different level.
and we will not get into we won't get into team affiliations right now.
Yeah,
I don't want
you want to
alienate
avoid that right
your
now.
audience exactly, but yeah, but it's a beautiful ballpark. And my buddy Josh Cantor, who's the key organist at Fenway Park, hooked us up for that gig, and he's a good longtime friend. So
Oh, that's great.
no animosity for your lovely park or history.
Well, I think we got to bring Jim out to do the interview when you come back and play in Boston next, and we want to be there and watch that happen. I think that'd be a lot of fun.
It's got to happen. I mean, well, tell you something. We'd probably talk about Roxy music for half the interview because we're both diehard fans. So that
Absolutely.
we may not get past that.
So Steve, you have a website, stevewynn.net, and that's Wynn, Wynn, and you can find out where you're going to be playing, and you can purchase your albums. Your new solo album is called Make It Right. You can purchase your book and swag and all kinds of stuff.
In fact, I have a BandCamp page. I'll tell your listeners, like most musicians, I have a BandCamp page where I'm selling the book, autographed and personalized. So you can get it all your favorite bookstores and on Amazon or whatever. But if you get it on my BandCamp site, it'll say, to John, rock on, Steve Wynn. So there you go.
I like that. So you have a new book, a new album. What's the next big project?
Well, I'm going to be touring behind this book for the next 6 months, like I said. So that's going to be the focus of everything. But the Dream Syndicate has a four CD box set of our second album, Medicine Show. It's coming out next summer on Fire Records in the UK, and that record's been out of print for the last 30 years. So that'll come out. And we'll probably do a big tour behind that when it comes out, and make a new record as well. Everything's still active. I'm at this point. Everything I've done, Dream Syndicate, Baseball Project, my solo career, and even a lesser known band called Gutterball that had a lot of fun over the years. We're gonna do something next year as well. So everything's in play. It's all right out there. And I'm at the point now where, well, I got to say, this has been my living and my job for the last 4 years, but it's also just what I do for fun and for adventure. And I'm always tend to say yes when something comes up. If I hear about a band in Italy who is doing something cool and they say, hey, if you want to come over and write a couple songs and record, I'll say, yeah, sure, why not? I tend to do that.
That's awesome.
So to say, I know what's going to happen next year, I really don't. Could be anything.
Well, I got to tell you, that's an amazing way to live and to be able to find that joy in everything you're doing. It's absolutely incredible. I love the way you look at things, and you can see that you really enjoy it as you're speaking about it. That's pretty cool to find someone that has been doing it this long that is still in love with what they're doing the way you are.
I am. I mean, something I talk about on the show is I talk about, and I say this, I use Alex Chilton, who's a big part of the book, and of meeting him before I started my band, before the Dream Syndicate, and what impact that had on me. But when I met him, he was very bitter. Now, Alex Chilton was a great writer and a great guy. I got to know him over the years. Very, very good person. Very into life. It's a tragedy he died so young. But when I met him, he was very bitter about his music, and it really struck me in a way because it broke my heart in a way because I thought, how can you be bitter? You've made some of the best music that changed my life, and over the years has changed a lot of people's lives. And I think I decided, if I ever have the good fortune to get to do what he's done and what people make a life out of music, I won't be bitter. And I think I've lived by that my whole life. Times you guys didn't ask this question. I applaud you, but I get the question every so often when people say, well, you're friends with people in REM and the Bangles, for example, or the Black Crowes. Do you ever feel jealous that they did better? I think you should have had their career. And I think I'm living the life. I've been a professional musician for 40 years. I can do whatever the hell I want musically on stage in the studio. Thank you very much. I'll check, please. I'm fine.
Right. I heard the other day, someone said every profession has a expiration date. And it's interesting because you do see people on top of the world and then they just like call it quits.
Yeah.
And it makes you wonder why they would do that. But it makes sense. You work so hard over the years, you need to enjoy yourself. It just comes to a point that you just say enough's enough and I'm going to stop here. It's not fun anymore.
I don't know if
And
we're
you're
ever going to
having-
hear that.
No, and you're having fun.
Well, right. I'm having fun. And the thing is, if you I always think about this, because people look at people who don't do this, say for a living or whatever, they'll look at they love making snarky comments about, say, Mick Jagger or Paul McCartney or Bob Dylan, and say, why are they still doing this? Don't they have enough money? And they don't realize it's not about the money. Now, I can't speak for those guys, but I think I can. And I'm telling you, sure, I guess nobody can ever have enough money or whatever. Maybe that's part of it. But really, what it is just you learn to love this life. You were when you were 10 years old, you dreamed of writing songs and playing music, and you're still doing it, and you want to keep doing it because it's a new adventure in it. It gives meaning to your existence, in a way that maybe other jobs do or don't. Hard to say. You get to go job by job and decide. If you're digging ditches, you might say, you know what, at 65, I'm glad to stop digging. I've dug enough ditches now for a while. I can take it easy now and stop that. But if your life is playing music and every night is a new adventure in a new city, you might say, I know I'm 80, but why would I stop? What's more fun? And I really honestly believe that in the case of people like that, that's the motivation. It's just, I want to play more music. I still am trying to play the best show I ever played in my life. And it might not happen tonight. It might happen tomorrow night.
I imagine, the ditch digger, he quits because his back hurts. As a musician, if you quit writing songs or playing music, your mind would hurt, right? Your heart would hurt.
I think exactly. I think that's it. I think something would make you want to do more of it because it is so much like so your mind and your heart that is the foundation of what gets you excited. A good day for me is a day where I write a song that excites me and moves me. A good day for me is a day where I play a show that really connected with the audience, with the other people on stage, and you want more of it. You don't want to quit. You want to keep going if that's what you do. You hopefully can do it. I look at it's such a sad story. Ian Hunter, who's one of my biggest heroes for a lot of reasons, wrote still writes great songs, and has made so many great records. But he was doing it till he was 80 and only quit because he got extreme tinnitus and his hearing is really messed up and it's painful to play music now. And I think he's 85 now. And I know he would still love to be out there touring, but he had to stop. I think that's the case for the ditch digger analogy. It's like, now it hurts if I gotta stop. But, knock on wood, we all, there's so many of the musicians out there now in our 70s and 80s doing this and just going, still doing it. And I think
thank God.
You hope you hope that, it's the flip side is the horrible tragedy of really wonderful people and friends like Matthew Sweet and Jesse Malin and even for a while my buddy Scott McCoy and Lucinda Williams and all these sorts of people who had strokes or got sick and suddenly can't do it. And in some cases they return, like Jesse Malin just is for heroic what he's been able to do. But you think that's the thing you dread in your life. It's like if you're a musician, you think, please, I think Warren Zevon had the song called it, but please don't let me get sick. Don't, I can endure the rough travel and the long days. Just let me be able to stand up and sling a guitar with my shoulder and do this. Because if you can't do that, then the end. That's it.
Yeah. Steve, it's a great conversation. We appreciate your time coming in and speaking with us. And we like to say when we have someone in for a conversation like this, we'd like to think we made a friend. So we want to thank you for coming on Musicians and Beyond and being a friend of ours. And we look forward to the time when we can spend some time with you here in Boston and or find you out on the road somewhere where we'll be and catch a show. We look forward to that.
Absolutely.
I like the sound of that. Let the friendship continue. I like that.